During the late 1960s, there were few bands more popular than The Association.
The Association.
The Association.
The Association.
And singing co-lead on several of their biggest hits, including Never My Love, was a young man from Hawaii named Larry Ramos.
When I grow tired of you, never my love.
As an instrumentalist, he was really good. He just knew all kind of chords, I'll call it jazz chords, on the guitar and ukulele, because that's what he did. He figured them out when he was a little kid. So it was just a natural thing to him. As a singer, he was top of the line.
He kind of like made it easy for middle America to see a brown-skinned person who was not black, but was Filipino, Asian, to be on TV and sing like he's just like everybody else.
Born on April 19, 1942 on the island of Kauai, Larry Ramos's musical talent became evident at a young age. Of Filipino, Chinese, and Spanish descent, little Larry won a statewide ukulele contest when he was 5. It earned him a trip to New York City, where he appeared on the Arthur Godfrey Show with Hawaii's legendary waterman, Duke Kahanamoku.
My grandma used to tell me that Dad used to sleep with his ukulele. And I asked him, I said, you know, Grandma told me you used to sleep with your ukulele. And he said, yeah. He said, because, I said, why? And he said, so I could wake up playing it. And he actually taught himself how to play by listening to the radio. As far as Grandma helping, she was the typical stage mother. So she was, and I think more than anything, as far as helping him in his career, that support and having that foundation of unconditional support was what really helped him move along in the industry.
In 1950, at the age of 8, he performed in the Hollywood musical, Pagan Love Song, which was being filmed on the Garden Isle.
Got a place in the sun, a particular one on a tropical avenue. Far away from
After his family moved to Southern California in the early 1950s, Larry was part of the national tour of The King and I, playing the Prince of Thailand opposite Yul Brynner. In the early 60s, while performing in local coffee shops, he was brought to the attention of a new folk music group called the New Christy Minstrels. He and Art Podell had been on the same bill at a local nightclub.
They needed somebody else, and I remembered Larry very vividly, and I said, I met this kid down in South Bay named Larry Ramos. And they questioned me delicately about the name Ramos. What did he look like? Nobody said anything, but it was very clear that they were looking for a visual image. So I described Larry in glowing detail, and they said, well, bring him in.
Larry was eventually given the okay and became the only non-white member of the group. In 1963, their debut album, presenting the New Christy Minstrels, won a Grammy for Best Performance by a Chorus. Larry's talents were spotlighted on this 1965 Julie Andrews special.
My daddy was a preacher, and he'd go from town to town. He'd open up the good book, and the folks would gather around.
Despite his talents, Larry, being the only minority, was often the subject of what was considered good-natured teasing.
Our own precious pineapple, Larry Ramos.
He was Asian, and we'd call him, oh, if he did a really great thing on the banjo, we'd say, that was a great riff. That was a pretty good riff for a slant eye. And they say, well, if better than a round eye could do, that kind of thing.
Larry talked about being teased in a 2014 interview with Guy Aoki.
Being a non-white in the group, they would be making fun of me. And they did when I first started. And I didn't like it too much, but, you know, I mean, when you're the new guy in the band, you know, you gotta live with shit.
Larry left the Christys in 1966 to spend more time with his twin daughters. But the next year, an upcoming group called The Association was looking to replace band member Jules Alexander, who was leaving for India.
Terry Kirkman of the association and I, who had been friends. I was friends with, we were all the folk singers. We were all in the same kettle and the same soup in Los Angeles. And Terry and I were talking, and Terry was saying, we need a replacement. And I knew that Larry was leaving the group. And I said, Larry Ramos would be ideal. He's a lead singer. His instrumentation is great. And I know Terry took it seriously.
Larry would sing co-lead on two of their biggest hits, Windy and Never My Love, which according to BMI was the second most played song in the 20th century.
You say you fear I'll change my mind. I won't require you. Never mind love.
I really admired him when I was a little kid. And I used to watch him play and I'd always keep my mouth shut. I'd never say anything except listen to him, and just marvel at what he was doing. But it just seemed like he was as good an instrumentalist as he was a singer.
As the first Asian American man to achieve this level of pop musical stardom, he was a true pioneer who inspired countless others.
It's amazing what he was able to accomplish nationally. Here's a guy from Hawaii who defied the odds. Very few Asian Pacific Islanders made it big on the mainland.
We were at a party, and this guy walked up to me. This blew my mind. He says, "That China boy with you?" And it took me a minute to think about the China boy. I said, "Yeah, he's my partner. Why?" And the guy just walked away. Nothing, no reaction at all.
Even when he was touring the South with the association, he would always carry around his ukulele because he was always worried about one of the good old boys going, "Hey, where you from, boy? We're not used to seeing people look like you, boy. Where you from?" So he would say, "Oh, I'm from Hawaii." And everyone changed, "Oh, Hawaii? Oh," and he says, apparently everybody wants to go to Hawaii. So that was he was like a goodwill ambassador for Hawaii.
In the mid-'80s, Larry would take co-ownership of the association and perform with the band until he died of cancer in 2014.
Today, while the blossoms still cling to the vine, I'll taste. I've been doing some concerts, and I start my show out by saying that when I was in the Minstrels, I shared the microphone with two very talented people, and Larry was one of them. He was a talented musician and singer and player, and he died too soon.
Most of my friends in bands had the Beatles, the Stones, they had, all the iconic acts, Buffalo, Springfield, to emulate. My black friends had Jimi Hendrix, they had the Motown artists, even Sammy Davis Jr. going further back. But for an Asian Pacific entertainer, there weren't any. So looking for role models, I found one album, and there was Larry Ramos. I said, that's interesting. I picked it up. And I heard the material on the radio, but I didn't realize Larry Ramos was in the group. So I picked it up and I said, one of these days, I'm going to meet this guy and thank him. So many, many years later, we had got together, and I said, when I was about a mere child, you inspired me, and we'd always laugh. And that was the first entertainer that went national, even international, that had any kind of prestigious position in popular music, in popular culture.
But it took people like Larry Ramos to get white America to get used to seeing people who are Asian or brown-skinned. And it wasn't easy, it took a long time. So thank you, Larry Ramos.